You're listening to the best of the bravest. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. Tonight's interview has been 4 months in the making. Welcome back to episode 279 of the Mike to New Haven podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun doing this one tonight, of course. Episode 278 was a fun one, and we're on the march to 300. I tell you, the episodes are just flying by. You're hard-pressed to even keep count these days. But 278 was a lot of fun with Chief Gene Roy, former chief of detectives for the Chicago Police Department for what was Volume 7 of the Beat Profiles of Police Nationwide. Interesting man, 30-year career in the Windy City alone, worked in North Dakota as an investigator before that. So if you want to check out that episode, tonight's episode is going to be equally interesting. But before that, we have a couple sponsors to take care of. Well, one really, but of course I have to get the word of my consulting company out there. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. You know, as they say, if you don't advocate for you, who else will? And now to our actual sponsor, and that being Mr. Joe Murray. If you're ever caught on the wrong end of the law, call Joe Murray. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer turned criminal defense attorney. With 15 years of experience in the NYPD from 1987 until 2002, he parlayed a successful career in the NYPD into an equally successful career as a criminal defense attorney. His website is jmurray-law.com, where you can reach him at 646-838-1702, or just email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. Joe's great. Got to spend some time down in the city with him recently. Very good man. All right, my next guest is still in the trenches with the New York City Fire Department, where he's currently a deputy chief, having joined the FDNY in the fall of 1996. His evolution within the department has seen him work in the Bronx, Queens, and currently as deputy chief in charge of the FDNY's Counterterrorism Task Force operations in the department's Counterterrorism and Disaster Preparedness Center. And that is a man I met 4 months ago at a Flying Aces event at Citi Field for this volume 46 of the Best of the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, is current FDNY deputy chief, Paul Miller. Chief, welcome. How are you?
Mike, nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So first things first, before I get into the job, tell me about where you grew up.
I grew up in a town called Center Reach out on Long Island. It's about 10 minutes south of Stony Brook University. Jokingly referred to in the firehouse as Never Reach, because it's about 50 to 60 miles away from the Bronx, Manhattan firehouses. Moved here. My parents moved out to Long Island from California when I was about 3 months old, and been here the rest of my life.
So was there always an interest in civil service, or was it one of those things where you thought to yourself as you got older, I'll give it a shot, I'll take the test?
It goes back to a very young age, like a lot of guys my age, very deeply inspired by the show Emergency. I can remember watching that with my brother growing up, and pretending to be John and Roy, and we thought that was the best thing ever. My father used to lay on the floor and pretend to be get defibrillated by us, and so after a few years, the show goes off the air, and you start to think of lawyers, doctors, and all the other stuff, and something hit me. It was right around the time I was graduating high school. Something about the fire service really appealed to me, and I joined a volunteer service a couple of years, about 2 or 3 years prior to the fire department test. And then I found out that the test was coming out, and I was like, I could get paid for this. And that's how it went from there.
Now, I'll stay on the volunteers for a second, because as I mentioned before, for a lot of the Long Island volleys, these guys are either emergency service cops in the city who are doing volley work on the side, or they're FDNY firefighters in the city who are doing volley work on the side. So did you have guys like that in your firehouse? And if so, what did they teach you?
So there were at the time, there's only 1 or 2 FDNY firefighters, and he only had about 4 years on at the time. But just the work ethic and the dedication to the craft, seeing how aggressive they were, was something that really, kind of stood out. And that's not to say I didn't work with great guys who were carpenters or plumbers and who were volunteers. But it was what they brought to the table and what they tried to teach the true volunteers out there was pretty incredible.
So during that time, can you recall a specific emergency? It could be fire or non-fire that most sticks out to you at MVA, anything like that?
There were a couple. There was I remember a bad motor vehicle accident. It was on a Sunday morning, and it just mangled the two cars, and it just struck me that I just kind of went into automatic mode. The one car the guys were working on, the other car, both doors were pinned, and I ended up going up and in through the sunroof to start treating the other patient in that car. And while they worked around me, and it was just one of those things like, wow, I can't believe I just did that.
So. Oh, yeah. That's something that gets the adrenaline pumping for sure. Now, before the FDNY, I mean, it's not for those of you that maybe outside the New York City area. If you take the test, the written test, that is, with the New York City Fire Department or New York City Police Department by extension, you're not guaranteed to get called right away. Some people do, but sometimes the waiting process can take months, if not years. Now, you said off the air you took the test in 1992, but you wouldn't get on until 1996. And in the meantime, you worked for UPS. Now, it's a lot of physical labor, and that helps you. That serves you well for coming onto the job where a lot of physicality is required. So tell me about those 7 years there and just waiting for that call that you got.
Yeah, it was one of the things about UPS that they really kind of harp on, and it was great, talking to your brother about this all backstage. But sense of urgency, and that was something they really drove home. And it same with the fire department, and being at UPS, they did interviews. They showed us programs where, hey, this guy, he's not with UPS anymore, but this guy was a former UPS. This guy worked for UPS. All these success stories coming out of there. And as I told you before, once I finally got on the job, I ran into about 3 or 4 other guys who not just worked for UPS, but worked for me at UPS when I was a part-time supervisor. And it just kind of reinforces that whole sense of urgency, that character, that trait that they look for. It serves you well in the fire department.
Oh, of course, you went from delivering packages to delivering a hose line. So, it's like that's, as you said, that sense of urgency. Got to hop off, get that package to a certain address and move on. Okay, got to hop off the rig, tend to this call, handle it to the best of your capabilities, move on to the next call if and when it comes. So before you got assigned to a firehouse, of course, October of 1996 was you going into the academy. At that time, it's about a 6-month process, at least back then. I'm sure it's still the case now. Tell me about what stood out from those you had the opportunity to be in the class with as far as the camaraderie is concerned, and also the biggest lessons that you can recall getting taught by your instructors.
The camaraderie was great. It was you really in those couple of weeks you really bond with the guys in your squad, the other guys in your platoon, and you just pick each other up. Every day guys would come in, and the biggest fear was that you were going to get recycled. If you got hurt, you didn't want to go sick, and you guys would tape each other up, and it truly was. It taught you the brotherhood that you would, hey, I got you, whatever you need, we'll get through this and get through the end of the academy. And the instructors were great. The instructors we had, looking back at how young I was and looking at them now, I'm probably about the same age, but they seemed so senior and so seasoned, and coming from all areas, busy areas of Brooklyn, busy areas of the Bronx. It really was an eye opener, and they were great, and a lot of people like, oh, the academy, 99.9% of the firemen look back at the days in the academy and go, yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's hard days, it's long days, but you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, I'm going to miss that. Yeah. not the push-ups, not the hard days, not the cold days, but just that sense of being together.
Oh, of course. And what's interesting about that too, from that time frame, like you mentioned, the camaraderie, going in, the class starts as hundreds of very different individuals. By the end of it, everyone is so like-minded. And that's the evolution over a 6-month period to where you come in and you still, maintain that personality as you go, but you come out kind of a single mentality, single file, single approach, molded by the principles of the FDNY along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that I was at the academy last night, and they had the new guys going into the next class there, and they're counting off, and they're off by a little bit, or they're trying to do the count on deck, and then by the end of the class, I mean, you're yelling that count on deck out together. There's no gap, there's nobody missing a beat. It's all uniformity, and it's great. It's fun to watch that evolution.
Oh, for sure. So coming out of the academy in the early winter of 1997 is when you go to Ladder 48 in the Bronx. Now, working in a truck right out the gate, pretty interesting. A lot of ventilation operations going on. Some companies are busy, others not. Bronx companies tend to be pretty darn busy, especially during those days. Was Truck 48 one of those companies?
48 Truck was a very interesting animal because back in the war years, they were one of the busiest truck companies in the city. Running in with 31 truck and 82 engine. And what would traditionally happen was those guys would finally get so beat up, they would go to one of the slower companies. They would go to City Island, get a little closer to home, kind of start to slow it down. 48 Truck, their runs decreased. They stopped with the bars, boxes, and the false alarms, but they still maintained a significant amount of work. So there was no reason for those guys to go anywhere. So when I got there, I'm 25 years old, kid from the suburbs, and I'm working with guys with 37, 38 years on a job who went through the war years. My first night tour, I was the junior guy on the rig by 21 years. Yeah. So it was, and I'm working with guys who are like my father's age, Vietnam veterans, again, guys who worked in the Bronx from 68 to 96. And, they're going to 5 fires a night. And I was just in awe of their experience and their knowledge.
That's one of those things where you don't even bother saying a word. There's nothing you could say. You just close your mouth and you try to learn as much as possible.
I had a couple of problems with my mouth, but I was put in line. It was made very clear to me, you may be smart, but you don't have to show it. So it was a little rough patch there, but we got through it, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to have worked there with those guys, and learned so much from them. From the Chiefs down to even the junior guys who would kind of take you on the side and go, "Hey, this is what we're going to do," and because they were brought in that same way and broken in by those same guys with that knowledge. It was great firemen all around.
Oh, for sure. We're talking with Deputy Chief Paul Miller. This is volume 46 of the Best and Bravest interviews with the FDNY's lead. If you have a question, fire it away, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. Shout out to Bill Ryan, of course, and John Costello in the chat. Everybody else tuning in tonight via YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter, of course. Do you recall your first fire in Truck 48?
Yeah, it was an oddball. So it was about 9:15 in the morning. We had the doors open, and there was I went there with 3 other guys, and one guy was catching all the work. And you come in the next morning, and you're like, "Oh, I missed another one." And he had the job. So, but this particular morning, I'm standing out by the front door, and a police car comes racing up, slams on the brakes in front of quarters. The cop jumps out. He goes, "There's a fire down on, I think it was on Whittier." And he goes, "There's a fire down on Whittier and the cross street." And he may have given us the address, but I just remember it was not the typical turn out the companies. Now I got a verbal. I got to get on a voice alarm, turn out the companies with very little information. And we get there, and it turned out to be a job. And it was I believe it was a propane explosion. I remember getting there, and it was we had to go down. It was like an auto body shop or something like that, or a mechanic shop. But the roll down gate was blown out, and I just remember getting there. We cut the gate. I went in with the captain, and I just remember in there thinking, I go, I can't. I have no idea where I am. I can't feel anything. There's nothing in the middle, and I'm just kind of like trying to hang on to feel a body and find a wall. And it was an eye opener, yeah. But that was that. And like I said, there wasn't a lot of fire with that one. The one that I remember that was maybe a few months later was a second alarm on arrival. Again, I was working with some of these senior guys, and we pull up. I had a very senior boss, very experienced boss, and I was just struck by the how calm everything was. We pull up. It was St. John and one of the side streets off the Bruckner, 73 and 42 were first due. We pull up. There's a guy at the window. The truck boss goes to the show. Is that you got him? He's like, I got him. Truck boss basically goes, give a second alarm. Gives a second alarm over the radio. We walk around to the courtyard, and it's blowing out of two windows in the courtyard, and it's that quiet kind of roar. And we just go walking up the stairs. We're not sprinting up there. And this is a guy who's been through. I think it was Bosco. I think it was Eddie Boscarino. And just we get up to the staircase. We got up to the fire floor, 73 and 42. We're making their way into the apartment. First line wasn't in place yet, and it was Billy Peters. Billy Peters was the boss. And we get to that landing. He goes, and we just wait there. Because we're not going above until that first hose line is in there. There's nobody's screaming, nobody's yelling. So we wait there, and here comes the hose line. And just as the hose line hits there, he goes, let's go. We go upstairs and we get done. I go, my God, that seems like it really should have been a lot more exciting, a lot more energetic. And it was just that calm demeanor that kind of really struck me about it. That, shouldn't we be running around, yelling and screaming? And it was a great learning experience on how to handle a job.
I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit with this, but I do want to ask you, and of course we'll get to your promotions to lieutenant, captain, and so on and so forth to this point as a deputy chief in your career. But how many lessons from a boss like that and others that you had during the early stages of your career have you taken with you as you've ascended further up in the ranks?
Tons, absolutely. From the littlest things, from my senior men. We had a guy, Eddie Tejan, who he always took the irons up until his last tour, 37 years on a job. And, this little Vietnam vet, he's out running the kids, he would get off the rig and just go. And you would have to be like, all right, fire's on the 5th floor. I'm going to find Eddie on the 5th floor. You'd have to go up there and find him. But just how to, little tricks of the trade, how to force a door, how to do this. And then, after I got promoted, taking that with me out to other boroughs and other firehouses who may not have been blessed enough to have those experienced guys in their firehouse, and then showing them these little tricks that I was able to learn from these guys. It was great. And it's just, and that's just part of the culture is spreading that knowledge to everyone you can and picking up tricks here and there.
Yeah. Of course, it's all about evolving because the job is going to keep changing and you have to make sure you change with it. So that's definitely imperative, as you mentioned. Now, you shared a house, if I'm not mistaken, in Truck 48 with Engine 94 and Battalion 3. So, there's a great synergy there as a result because you got the engine company right next door. Some guys, they'll move across the floor if they want to transfer, either from the ladder to the truck or vice versa. Battalion 3, you got the chief in quarters. Tell me about bonding with those guys.
It was great. It was a very close house, and again, a lot of those Vietnam veterans had actually they served together after the war in a reserve unit upstate. Mm-hmm. So some of them, they were a lot of them were cooks. They were great cooks. Oh man, I mean, being in Hunts Point, so we got the fish market wasn't there yet, but you had the fruit market and you had the meat market, and we would shop, and these guys would make these meals, and you would just be like, this should be a meal in a 4-star restaurant. Here I am, I'm in the South Bronx paying $5 for it. And it was just incredible. But the lessons, how these guys carried themselves and broke the tension by breaking each other's chops. It was a great experience. It was such a great house. They very close house. Having the chief in quarters is another sort of eye opener because you're there and you have it when you have the chief in quarters. It's a different interaction. You still, hey chief, how are you? But there's a lot more of that. Rather than when the chief shows up and you're like, oh yes, chief, and you're not used to seeing the chief all the time. And meanwhile, here you are, you're making his bed, you're talking to him, and I think that provided a lot of lessons too. One of them, he's out there a lot. Battalion Chief Tom Martin, still very active in the Fire Chiefs Association and the retirees. I learned a ton from that man. Not all of it good, but yeah, I had great chiefs that throughout the years that I got to work with up there, and it really did kind of pave the way for where I am now.
Oh, it molds you. And I think that's one thing that's so great about the fire service, especially the FDNY, is that sometimes with certain agencies, and you see this a lot, unfortunately, with law enforcement, it's not to say that chiefs can't do a great job. There's a lot of them that do, but when they're higher up, they're not out in the field as much, and they kind of lose that connection with the rank and file. Not so much in the FD. They're out in the field. They're going out to the job still. Yeah, they still have, probably more administrative duties when they get back to the firehouse. But as far as the job, everyone's role is the same, which is helping in any capacity they can. You'll see a chief on a line. If he can get that nozzle, we'll try to. So that's the great thing about it. It truly cements why it's a brotherhood.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There are chiefs out there who've tried to take a nozzle or two, and hey, chief, I got this. But yeah, that's one of the best parts, and that's one of the things I miss. I kind of miss as you move up. You become a chief, you become a little more removed from the firehouse. Once you're in a battalion, you're still in a firehouse, but especially as a deputy, now, people kind of look at you like, oh, it's a deputy. Me personally, I still love being in the kitchen with the guys. I still love, having somebody say something to me, a little, kind of set me in my place or make fun of me. And I enjoy that. I love the give and take of that. And that's one of the things that kind of starts to go away when you get to that rank.
Yeah.
Especially as battalion chief, because now you're traveling around, you're basically all over the city, and you'll walk into a kitchen with the white shirt on, and guys are they're talking and they're laughing and they're joking. They turn around, they see the white shirt, and it goes silent. And you're like, it's all right, guys, just
be yourselves.
Yeah,
be yourselves.
Yeah. So.
And some guys will tell you that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh boy. Now I will say a truck functions in a variety of different purposes besides a fire. You have the MVAs like we talked about earlier, where you can respond carrying certain tools in the truck that's good, or even at a fire. There's those roof ops, there's the ventilation tactics. So tell me about other emergencies that you got to go to in the early years in Truck 48 that stick out, where you got to see why the truck functions well as a truck.
Yeah, well, I mean, the roof operations, especially in the Bronx, are something you gotta really be sharp on. I was very fortunate again to have seasoned firefighters, even again the 15, 20-year guys up there showing you, helping you out on the roof, helping you pull, so that that's a big part of it. That's one of the things you really gotta be sharp on, especially when you get a top floor fire. We didn't do a lot of Hearst tool work in Hunts Point. We had kind of a very limited highway area, and with all the truck traffic, but we did get our share of trucks, cars into trucks, and kind of oddball stuff down in the meat market. People getting caught in machinery, that sort of thing. So it was. Again, an eye opener in how to address. There's no playbook for every emergency. You got to come in, you got to look at it and go, how am I going to deal with this? And that's the one thing I really enjoy about truck companies. You really had to think, especially if you had the OV or the roof, and you were on your own, and you had to come up with the obstacles and find solutions by yourself. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Talk with Deputy Chief Paul Miller, Volume 46, Best of the Bravest. Shout out to Mike Thomas, Chris Burke, and Rob Procaccini in the chat tuning in tonight as well. Now, real quick, I just wanted to touch on it. When 9/11 hit, did 48 lose anyone?
48 truck didn't lose anyone. We had a former member, Sammy Otis, who had transferred down to 4 truck, who passed away. We had Billy Krukowski from 21 truck. He had come up on the rotation program that they had and spent a year with us in 94 engine, and he was a great guy. We had a blast with him, and I was we have had a couple of losses since with 9/11 related illnesses. Chief Sandoran, Chief Vaughn. It had there was an effect job wide, and everybody knew somebody like Pete Beadfield from 42 truck. A lot of the guys from 48 knew them because we always ran in with them. It's not like we were untouched. There were some very close people that we lost, although not directly from the company.
So tell me about, those months afterwards where you're covering for certain companies that are down at the pile, either looking for their fellow brothers or just the pilot duty. Tell me about the uptick in duty for 48.
So, well, that's kind of the odd part. I wasn't in 48 right after 9/11. So I was in 48 for 9/11, and around October of 2001, they had looked for volunteers to go to Manhattan, and I had rotated through 16 engine 2 years prior, and knew all of the guys who from 7 Truck who were killed on 9/11, and felt that that's what I had to do. And so I went back. I volunteered to go back to 7 Truck. I just become a truck chauffeur. I had 4.5 years on the job, and I went back to 7 Truck for 6 months, and they were great. I got a little offended because they started the, you would detail a guy to the pile for 30 days, and I wanted to do my part. I said, I go in, I would talk to the bosses. I go, hey, I'll go. It's my turn. Let the guys stay here. It's their firehouse. They're dealing with funerals and everything. Let me go down to the pile for 30 days. No, you're a guest. You're not going. They refused to let me go, and which I appreciated. But it was an interesting time. Being back with the guys that I knew, so there were a lot of laughs and a lot of good memories celebrating the lives of the guys that 7 Truck lost. That I'll always cherish from that time.
Oh yeah, even in the bad times, there's still, the support of those that you love, and there's still good memories to be had, even during, like I said, the most difficult of occasions. Now, I'll ask you, you didn't make lieutenant until 2007 with 10 years in the job, but some guys start studying years in advance. When did the idea, you know what, maybe I should hit the books for this, start to enter your mind?
So the test was originally scheduled for fall of 2001, and I had thought about it, and if I had put in a decent effort, I probably could have gotten made, but I had just gotten back to the Bronx off the rotation. I'd only spent 10 months in the firehouse before I got sent out, and I was back there and I enjoyed it, and I wanted to continue to enjoy that. And so I really didn't put an effort in on that 2002 test. No regrets about it. When the next test came around, I put in the effort, and a lot of guys I talk to, you kind of the timer starts to run out. You go into the firehouse and it's not the same firehouse you started in. And, some guys, they can spend 20, 30 years in the same place. Me, it was kind of like, I'm looking for something a little different. And fortunately, I did well enough on the test that I passed it and got promoted in 2007. And the timing was perfect. I felt I was very comfortable where I was as a fireman. With my knowledge, I wasn't worried about, what are the guys going to think of me because I only had 4 years on the job. So I was very, very happy with how that played out.
Oh yeah, and it's a big difference, and you can't fault the guy for getting the promotion. Listen, he hit it hard in terms of studying. He got the promotion. Good on him. But you hit on a good point there. When a guy has 4 years on, and all of a sudden he's in charge of a crew that has 20, 25-year veterans on, or even 15-year veterans on it, it's a little weird. It's easier to take orders from somebody that at least has a decade on the job.
We actually had somebody who did that. There's always a few out there, guys studying in the squad car because he's on the fire department list, and he's got 3. Back then, if you had 3 years city service, you could take the test. And we had a few junior lieutenants come through, and they had a rough go of it. Who's the junior man tonight? It's like, it's you all, Lou. We had some fun with it. It is. Having that time behind you definitely counts for something. Because if not, you really got to make it up with experience or personality with who you are. Especially if it's a senior firehouse.
Of course, and relying on those senior men to help get you through. And of course, you can't come in there and try to stamp your ticket right away. And
you got to earn the respect. Yep.
Right. And that applies to anybody, not just, firefighters, but anybody, even in rank of authority, such as lieutenant captain, so on and so forth. So you spent the next 6 years from 2007 until 2013 in 2 separate engine companies. First is 307, and that's in Queens, if I'm not mistaken. So each borough represents a reset. The way you do it in the Bronx is not the same as how you do it in Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, so on and so forth, Staten Island. So going from the Bronx and what 48 Truck was doing to 307's operations in Queens, how much of a reset was that for you personally, if at all?
It was because I had done the rotation, so I had spent 2 years in engine companies prior to that. But it was a different animal going to assuming that engine company role and kind of taking a step back as, hey, we're a unit, we're going to operate as a unit, and making sure that hose line is in place. That's the big part of it. So it was good, and there were a couple of younger guys there when I got there. Got to 307, and I was very blessed to land there almost immediately. I really didn't bounce too much as a lieutenant. The captain really took care of me, and I'd done a vacation there, and he had asked me to come back after when that spot opened up, and it was great. It was great, and it makes you very well rounded. There are guys out there that I know. It's like, oh, I'm going to be a lieutenant in a truck company. I'm going to be a captain of a truck company. I was a fireman in a truck company. I strongly advocate for just when the place is right, and 307 154 was one of those places. I kind of part of it. It's not necessarily true what you said for all the cases, because 307 154, the way that house carried themselves, it reminded me of a 6th Division firehouse. And that's one of the things that really appealed to me about it was how the guys acted and their knowledge and and how they cared about the job. So it was a great fit for me. I loved it there.
Oh, of course. And, listen, when I say Queens Marines on this show, either about PD or FD, I'm saying the term lovingly, because they're actually putting in work out there. Some guys use that term in a derogatory sense because they think, oh, Queens isn't working. Not true, as you can attest to. Not true. Queens is putting in the work too. They get plenty of jobs, and they do a great job with it.
Yeah, it's funny because Queens is known for mostly being private dwelling area. 307 had a great area because they had everything. They had the H types, the garden apartments, with the courtyards in the back. They had walk-ups with working dumbwaiters and walk-in elevators in apartments. They had private dwellings. They had taxpayers. So you had a really good. The only thing they didn't have was standpipes. They had one standpipe building in their entire first 2 area. So that was one of the things you really had to kind of be sharp on if we went down to Lefrak City. But it's an interesting area.
So, like I said, you had the quarters with 154, and obviously, having been in a truck company for the first 10 years of your career, you understood them well. So, I imagine helped you a lot. Helped you a lot too, being in that house.
Yeah, I got to there were some great guys in the truck company, then senior guys who we really clicked, and I loved getting to work across the floor in 154 with those guys, they kind of 154 and 48 actually are like kind of sister. They relocate to each other's quarters usually if there's like a real big fire, and so it's kind of odd how it all works out like that.
Oh, that's pretty funny. It's a great symmetry there. And it's a callback, like I said, to the first half of your career. So I'll ask you, certain guys, when they come on the job, have favorite drills that gradually, as they continue to train and their officers above them run them, they really take a liking to them. Now you're in a unique spot where you're the officer, so you can call back to those favorite drills and you can run them as you see fit in the firehouse with your crew. So what were those drills for you where it's like, man, now that I'm lieutenant, I can't wait to run this with the guys?
Yeah, I just liked, and again, being in the truck company, I liked if I was working in a truck company or we're doing a company drill together, because the knock is always, give the engine guy the roof, get him out of the way. And so there was nothing better than getting out on the apparatus floor, getting a big piece of chalk, and then drawing a roof, on the floor, and then going through it with the guys and going, all right, here is your window, where you're going to cut your hole, where would you give this report? Where would you put the ladder? And we're just playing pretend. We're just drawing on the sidewalk, and it's good. And then the other thing was ladder operations. I always made it a point to do ladder operations with the guys at 307 because we had single engine and 316 down a block, 154 and 138 if they were out. I said, we may get there and have to throw a ladder up. If we're not on a box, so I made sure that the guys knew how to get the ladder off and get a portable up by themselves, because it's one of those things. If you're a few years in an engine company, you just kind of forget that it's on there and kind of blow it off. And then one of the other things I just like to do, and I took this from, kind of stole this from, I learned it in 16 and 7, was we go on in on an EMS run, and if the stairs weren't labeled, I'd stop, maybe midway, and I would turn to the one guy and go, "What floor are we on?" And the guy would be like, I said, "Right." I said, these are the things you got to know. You got to count. You have to be aware, or where's the front of the building from here? And that was just one of those things. I just, simple little things like that to just get you thinking and go, wow, that's something I really should know. So I enjoyed those things.
Oh, of course, because it could hit the fan at any moment. And that's true. Know your address, know what floor you're on, because you're thinking about an EMS run. You're going in, you're focusing on that. Nothing wrong with that. You should be focused on the task at hand. But there's other factors. And anything, sometimes, listen, Murphy's Law can be quite cruel on some days. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So if it goes wrong, it helps to know where you are. So I like that you mentioned that.
Yeah. Yeah, and the guys were receptive about it. And one of the fires with 307 that kind of stood out for me, it wasn't much of a fire. It was, but it was in a big H type. And we came down, and at the time, 307 was a 5-man company, and because they were a private dwelling company, there weren't really a lot of long stretches. So on calls that didn't involve a fire, the control guy would get off the rig and check the hydrant. And so this fire was in a big H type, 3rd floor. I come down when we're done, and there's 8 or 10 lengths sitting in the lobby. So I go back to quarters, and I start asking the junior guys, I said, "What's the control man's job?" I'm like, "Oh, check the hydrant." "It's the control man's job." "Okay, check the hydrant." Somebody please get this right. "What's the control man's job?" "Check the hydrant." I go, no. That's it. Yeah. So, but that's the Queen's policy for most companies, is that if it's a short stretch, if it's a private dwelling, the control man will stay there and help the chauffeur to get quick water. Great move. But what they didn't understand was that in these bigger buildings, if it's a long stretch, it's going to be a while before we get water. We need to control that stretch. And that's one of the arts that I think kind of gets lost after a few years. It kind of, good engine companies still practice it and reinforce that. But it's kind of that 5th minute, falling into a pattern of, hey, I'm the control guy. I'm for 5 minutes. I check the hydrant. It's a gas leak. I check the hydrant. It's private. I check the hydrant. But you got to remember what your first job is. You got to control the stretch.
Right. Now, there's certain nuances that it's good to keep with you as you go, because with a lot of these emergencies, listen, it's not that you abandon your training, but so much of these emergencies require you to not only implement your training to a large degree, but you got to improvise in a fair amount of them too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those one of the things I kind of preach now with counterterrorism is that, look, we'll give you all these skills. For the rescue task force, we'll go through the same drill every time, because that, just to kind of hit all those points. But when something goes wrong and you gotta have the solution, we'll give you the tools. You got to come up with the solution, and that might be, again, something as simple as, if you got the OV, you got to, find a different way to take the gate or find a different route. I know guys that, they get on the OV and they get to a window, and it's the wrong window, and it's not their fault, because you look at the layout and you assume that would be the window, but now you have to come up with a plan B to get to where you're supposed to be.
Absolutely. So you made captain in 2010, and then you head out to Engine 286, still in Queens and Glendale. Now, I asked guys this who made lieutenant. By this point, it's about 3 years that you were lieutenant. When you made captain, one part of it is it's an easier transition, because now you have a feel for what it's like to be a boss. But with 3 years as a lieutenant, did you feel you had enough time to find your footing as a boss prior to that promotion? Did you feel comfortable?
Yeah. No, I felt really comfortable. My captain in 307, Al Blocker, who ended up going another, I think maybe 10 years as the captain of 307, and the captain of the truck there, John Fortunato from 154, were great captains, and they really set a great example on how to be a good captain, a good leader. And so when I got down to the 13th and into 286, it was I was very comfortable with my style and how I wanted to run things. And 286 was a little different, because initially I was there as a medical leave, and it turned into a long-term spot, a little over 2 years. So it wasn't like I went in there and, hey, it's my spot now, and here's what we're going to do. You want to kind of like, all right, hey, the captain will be back in 2 weeks. It's all good. And it was kind of a slower transition into that. But again, you found your way, and it worked out. It worked out.
What did you come to enjoy most about 286?
How much of a hidden secret it was. So 286 was one of these companies that over the years, back in the late 80s, early 90s, ended up with a bad reputation. And when I got there, I was very surprised at the guys in that firehouse and how hard they worked every day and on every fire to disprove that reputation to all the surrounding firehouses. And it's true. One of the guys in the firehouse said it. He goes, the hardest thing to do is get rid of a bad reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys went out every day. There was not one thing that I asked them that they didn't do. There was not one thing that they weren't proficient at. And they had a great blend of guys who were senior guys, 15, 20 years guys. One of the guys that worked there, I was fortunate enough to work with when 73 engine had their quarters closed and they were in with us. He was rotating through 73 engine at the time. So I had a connection with him, Eddie Dillon. So I can kind of rely on him to kind of, find my bearings. Eddie, how am I doing? And, but yeah, I had a lot of fun there. It was a great house. It really was. I really enjoyed my time there. And I was sad to leave when the time finally came.
No, of course. And it's funny you say bad reputation, right? I call it the Bill Buckner theory, which is Bill Buckner had a great career.
Phenomenal baseball career, and one play dictated his entire life.
Exactly. He was a great first baseman. And when people mention the name Bill Buckner, all they can picture is the ball going through his legs against the Mets in the 86 World Series. So it's true. Even if it's something that precedes you well before you even got on the job, you're right. It takes a long time to wash that stain off. Now, while you were there, Sandy happened in 2012. Yes. Was Glendale impacted heavily by that?
No, not to the same extent that the other areas were, because Glendale's over near Cypress Hills. So, there was some minor street flooding, a couple of trees down. But I was in 286. I had worked the storm. It was Monday, so I worked the storm up and down. Got off, and I was in 286 that night, and we did a 24. And we were in the Rockaways for just about the entire 24, going on calls. And it was quite, stunning. I'm really at a loss for words to describe cars up on top of, other cars, and seeing the amount of destruction that the Rockaways took was pretty incredible.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And I can still remember the reports out of Queens, certain parts of Queens. But to your point about the Rockaways, where certain parts were literally underwater. It looked like you were watching a movie.
Yeah.
like you see those sci-fi, World War III movies, and you're thinking,
I was in a spare engine at a 314 in southeast Queens that night, and we went down. We went down to the Rockaways. Get back to quarters, back down to the Rockaways. Get back down to Rockaways, and I, being in a rig and trying to get to an address, and I remember going, this rig feels like it's floating. And and the water be coming up, and I'm telling the guy, whatever you do, don't take your foot off the gas. I said, we got to get through this. It was a crazy night. It really was.
I can only imagine what that was like. So you stay in Queens. In 2014, you go over to Truck 142, which is in Ozone Park. So this is now, almost a decade in Queens, but you're back in a truck. So it's kind of back home in a sense for you, because after 10 years in 48, here you are in 142. So it's bittersweet because, of course, you come to love your time in engine companies. But I imagine there was a part of you that's like, man, I'm back home again. This is kind of where I started my career.
that was part of the reason that one of the reasons that I didn't take the spot in 286 was because I knew I was going to get promoted. I'd done well in the Battalion Chief's test. I knew I was going to get promoted, and I wanted to, that was one of the things. And again, I wanted to finish up in a truck company, and it didn't have to be the busiest truck company. I wanted to go to a few more fires before I was, I had to give all that up and be on the outside. I was very fortunate to get 142 truck. They're just a great company. They do a great amount of work. They do it well. And again, I just have so many great memories in that firehouse too.
It wasn't a long stay, but it was a good stay. So for
Yes.
you, tell me about an
Yep.
average day in 142 truck.
Uh, the beauty of it is that it's very, you can be very durable there. There's no 6-story walk-ups. There's no projects. There's no elevators. So it's very good for saving your career. But just gas leaks, car accidents. You had a lot of car accidents. You had Atlantic Avenue. You had Cross Bay. You had Woodhaven. But you knew when you were going to a fire, and they were pretty frequent down there. I mean, for years, 142 has been at the top of the list for all number of all hands in the city. Top 25, top 30 for several years in a row. They just don't go out the door as much, and it's a great place to work. As far as that, they're going to kill me because it's a great kept secret, but.
I was going to ask you, was it another one of those secrets like 286?
Yeah, yeah, it really was, and the other companies that are around 293 and 293 and then 294, 143. Just they're not those because there's companies in Queens, truck companies and engine companies in Queens that have stellar reputations. They're I want to go to this company because they go to so much work, and you just you find this little spot and you go, this is great. This is all I want, and it was a great place. It really was.
Had it not been for the promotion to Battalion Chief, which came in 2016, would you have stayed there the rest of your career?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Sounds like
Yeah,
I can see
definitely.
your face light up talking about truck 142, so I get it. Listen,
Well, it's I tell everybody the story when after I got out of the command course, I did a vacation in the 16th Battalion up in Harlem,
mhm.
and at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, I'm in the Polo Grounds projects for like the third or fourth time on a gas leak, and I'm just thinking to myself, what did I do? What did I do?
Can I go back?
Right. I'm having second thoughts, but it all worked out. So
Oh, definitely. Listen, your present operation, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, is amazing, and we definitely will touch on this for this volume 46, the best, the bravest. Before I get to that, though, like I said, Battalion Chief in 2016, you went out to Battalion 14, which, if I'm not mistaken, is in the Bronx. So you're back in the Bronx at this point, just about 20 years into your career, but you're in a much different role than when you first came on in 1997. As a Battalion Chief, what kind of a mark were you looking to make? And tell me about the demographic. What's the response area of Battalion 14?
So the 14th Battalion is widely considered one of like the poorest areas or poorest congressional districts in the city, and it does have it's a large number of projects, a lot of older structures because it's one of the first areas in the Bronx. It was just because it's just outside of Manhattan that it started to settle. So you have some older brownstones, a historic area, but contrasting that now. In the last 7 or 8 years is the development along the water of luxury buildings. So there are buildings going up in that area. There was one apartment building. The guys would point out. They go, the top floor apartment in that building went for $999,000, and you're overlooking a vacant gas station. and you're like, what? But that area is really becoming developed with high rise luxury buildings. So it's really starting to go a change, and now these guys are going to have to adjust a little bit to a different style, and they're going to be losing some work, but um, it's a real interesting area. And in addition, not like Queens, the companies are right there. Your companies are right in with each other. So I mean, Squad 41 is only is 10, 12 blocks away from Engine 60. So there are your second and third companies are in very fast. So as a battalion chief, it makes your life very easy because you're not sitting there worrying, oh man, I could really use another engine right now. They're all all the players are going to be there pretty quick, and you can go right to work.
That's why Squad 41's motto is the best of both worlds, because they get Harlem, and
Yep.
of course they get a lot of the Bronx too. And listen, having the special operations command squads in your back pocket is never a bad thing in any of these jobs.
No, and they're a great company there. And again, I'm not speaking ill of any of the other stock companies, but Squad 41 is, they understand their role a lot of the time on their first two boxes is we're an engine company. And there are guys out there in special operations who don't necessarily subscribe to that, but for them as a unit, that's their thing. They're like, no, hey, we're the third due engine, or we're the second due engine. Yeah, we're going to help stretch. And the captain up there, Tommy McHugh, who's an absolute gentleman, is he's just to be in a 14th battalion and have him right next door. He's you pick his brain, you get his advice, and you'd be on a fire, and he's giving you a report from the fire floor, and it's like solid. You don't need to question it. You're not worried about it. Hey chief, I think we should. You got it, Tommy. That's what we're doing. So
before you can even finish a sentence.
yeah, like you don't have to ask me, Tommy. Just tell me what you're doing, and I'm good with it.
No, of course. There's certain guys that you just trust with your life, and it's great to have those guys working alongside you. And a good fire officer knows to rely on those guys. There's no ego involved in that. The guy knows what he's doing. Let him go. Let him do his thing.
Yeah. And again, that's one of the challenging parts of a battalion chief, especially a new battalion chief, when you're bouncing around the entire city and you don't necessarily know the players, and you're looking at the writing list and you're going, I don't know one name on that list, and now you have a fire, and now you're in areas you didn't even know these companies existed. And if you don't mind, I'll just tell a quick story. So I was covering in the 3-2 battalion one night, which again, I didn't even know that area of Brooklyn existed. Red Hook, 202, 101, and we get a run. It was about 2 a.m. for a fire. It comes over as a 1075. So now I'm thinking, all right, 1075. I'm the all hands chief. And we get there, and it turns out it was a verbal behind, again, nothing ever goes according to plan. It was a verbal behind the quarters of 279, 131. So they gave the 1075 right off the bat. So I get there, and I'm looking around, and I don't see another chief. So now I'm the incident commander. I don't know any of these guys, but, again, getting great reports. Everything's kind of matching up, and they did a phenomenal job. It was a fire in a 2-story commercial, and it was a really, really tough stretch, and they did a great job with it. And again, it's a part of that is trusting your gut and trusting the guys that are out there.
No, of course, that reliance is always key. And again, we go back to the brotherhood thing that we talked about at the beginning. Listen, that guy knows what he's doing. You trust in his abilities, he trusts in yours, and it blends together to make for a great operation. You wish these things didn't happen, that they didn't befall these people. But if they're going to happen, you want to be there, you want to do a good job, and that's what happens consistently. Not just those companies, but all companies across the city. And I'm glad you touched on that. Now, you also mentioned, actually, before I get to that, you had just gotten to Battalion 14, the Bronx. He was in Battalion 19, so I don't know how well you knew him, if at all. But 2016 is when Chief Fahey gets killed in that explosion in September of 2016, I believe. Did you know him at all?
We had crossed paths a couple of times. I knew him by face. I didn't know him personally. And I remember going up to that scene for a watch line, and getting up there and hearing, and talking to guys about what happened. And I look at that fire as something where, you can do everything right. And he did. They didn't take up. They had something. We're still investigating. They were checking exposures. They were doing everything. He wasn't even standing in front of the building. I believe he was kind of off to the side. And if he had been standing 20 feet to the right, if he had been standing 10 feet closer to the building, he would have been fine. And and that's one of the tough things to accept on this job is that those things are going to happen. And and it was also an eye opener, because it was like, wow, all right, I'm a battalion chief. I'm not immune. And you start to think, I'm on the outside now. It's all good. It's you don't want to get into that false sense. So that was a tough one. That was just a tragic fire, and again, just an example of, you could do everything right, and sometimes that's just the way it happens.
Yeah, he seemed like a really good guy. Everybody that knew him says he was an
Yeah,
excellent guy, excellent fire
yeah,
officer.
absolutely, absolutely. Not a, and I've he worked in 83 engine down the block in the 14th Battalion. Nothing but great things to say about him there. 19th Battalion, loved him, and yeah, just a well loved and well respected fire chief.
Yeah, he's definitely not forgotten. Hard to believe it's been 7 years, time's flying, but he remains remembered for the good man he was and the good fire officer he was. By extension, now here's where I could touch on citywide emergencies. That's the cool part about being a battalion chief. There's just about nowhere you can't go. So tell me about great emergencies, either fire or non-fire related, that you were able to go to, having your fill as a battalion chief.
Well, Manhattan's always a tough one. I had There was a high rise residential, luxury residential, and that's one of those. Oh boy, I did a little time in Manhattan, but not a lot, and so that was being a little nerve wracking. And the odd thing about the battalion chief position is, you can be inside, and I was in a few of those fires where I'm just kind of like, this isn't good. I remember one particularly in Richmond Plaza where the fire was on the 5th floor, and I'm putting my mask on 3, and we get to the 5th floor staircase, and it's now the hottest fire I've ever been in. Um, it was not going well. And then there was another one. I was covering, and it was in the Bronx, and I just remember when we pulled up. It was in a brownstone on the 1st floor. When we pulled up, the smoke pumping out of the window on the 1st floor, and I looked at it, and it was, I believe, 2 years to the day of the Davidson fire in Harlem, and I just remembered how much that looked like, that video, that smoke pumping out, and I just got that feeling. I go, this isn't going to end well, and the companies did a great job. The first line lost water. It was a tough stretch, and we almost had a mayday, but again, to kind of speak to evolving, like you would refer to earlier. The battalion chief, who was a very senior battalion chief at the time, made the call. He's like, "We're putting water in from the front of this thing." And he goes, "I don't care. It's an exterior stream. We're going to put it in, and we're going to knock this down." Because the reports he was getting from the engine company inside was like, "Yeah, we got it." He's looking at it outside, going, "No, you don't." And meanwhile, I'm at the top of the stairs, and I have my hand on the line, and I can feel the line go limp, and I'm just going, "This is just about to go really bad." And but yeah, he made a great call. He's like, "Yep, we're going to put water in this from the front, and we'll call it a day." And then they knocked it down, went back in, put it all out, and everybody was okay. But those experiences, they just they're really shape your career. You kind of look back and I go, "All right, that was a good one. Let's put that one away. Let's remember that one. Don't be afraid to use the exterior stream, or don't be afraid to kind of pull the guys back a little bit."
No, of course. And that's what the public doesn't see, how many close calls there are day by day. There's so many instances where something can go wrong. And for as many instances where there's, Chief Fahey, something where he did everything right, as you said earlier, and something unfortunately did go catastrophically wrong, there's the flip side where guys still do everything right, not knocking them at all. And they just miss serious injury, if not death, by a hair. It goes to show how dangerous the job can get in
Yeah,
the
and
blink
that's
of an eye.
yeah, that's the challenge of being a chief officer, is that you have to balance the guy's aggressiveness with their safety, and not knocking aggressive companies. They were going to go in there, we're going to put this out. But as a chief, when you sit there and you start to think it's time, where especially taxpayer fires these days, you go, we're not doing this. We're going to back out. We're just going to in that mentality of, hey chief, 2 more minutes and I got it. Having to talk to guys and just go, no, guys, we're not going to do this. And so that's a tough position to be in. But the Chiefs, they kind of, the Chiefs course, they really kind of drive that into you. And we had some great presenters in the Chiefs course talk to us about some fires that really kind of went bad and their experiences, and it just kind of like gives you, all right, and so it gives you a lot to think about, and how you would run a fire, and what you would do if you were in that same situation.
Before I touch on the counterterrorism task force, I do want to ask you about Twin Park. Speaking of fires, you went there on the third alarm, and even if it was the third alarm, it was still a very chaotic and ultimately extremely tragic job. Tell me about that job from your vantage point.
So I was working that day. I was up in the battalion, and the scanner was on, and we could hear, man, we're getting numerous calls with this 1077. And I was talking to the officer I was on the phone with the officer from 71, and we both he goes, "This job doesn't sound like it's going too good." I said, "Yeah, it's going sideways on them up there." And with that, they got toned out for it. I think they went on the second, or they might have gone on the third with me. I'm not sure, but yeah, we headed up there, and I remember getting up there, and we stopped. The staging area was around the block on Webster, and we stopped, and I had a view of the back of the building, and I'm watching this, and I'm going, "This is not good." And I was by myself at the staging area. They were calling in the company so fast because they had so many people they were doing CPR on, and so many apartments they had to clear. That it was a while before I had any company in the staging area, but. Yeah, just watching that fire blow, the smoke just blowing out of there, and the reports were it was incredible. And the guys who were in there, the guys who worked that day, really did. They went to the wall. I mean, the first new truck officer, John Hunt from 56 Truck, he was a lieutenant in 154. We were lieutenants together in 307 and 154, and I just remember seeing him and just like, man, what the hell. And yeah, it was just one of those once in a lifetime fires that as you see the stretchers coming out and the ambulances lining up and my job was basically trying to keep Webster Avenue clear so that the ambulances could get down, get in and out. Because the mentality is I got to park as close as I can. Like telling guys, go around the corner, go drop your guys and get out of here. And so it was just another one of those memorable fires where you're just like, wow, that was bad. And you file that away as a learning experience, just to like, man, I hope I never get something like that. But if I do, hopefully I got enough out of this one to help me with the next one.
Yeah. You know what? And you don't forget the lives lost, of course, the 17 lives lost, quite a few of them children, what makes it even more tragic. But a lot of people were saved that day, thanks to the great efforts of the FDNY. And that's a positive, at least in a tragic job like this, under chaotic circumstances. Everyone from the chiefs on down did such an amazing job. There's a lot of people still alive today.
Yes.
Thanks to what they did that
day. Yeah. The companies and the companies that operated on those upper floors where the smoke was getting up into, did a lot. They were just going from apartment to apartment to apartment. They were sheltering people. They were taking them down the staircase. And again, coming up with solutions on their own to protect these people and to get them out of the building, whether they sheltered them in place and stayed with them or got them out. A lot of great actions that day.
Absolutely. So this year we go from that to this year, which has represented a big change for you. Of course, you make deputy chief, and I congratulated you off the air for that. I'll congratulate you on the air for that, because it's a big step, another step, positive one at that in your career, almost 30 years going strong. And now you're in the Counterterrorism Task Force, and more specifically, the Counterterrorism and Disaster Preparedness Center. Now, when people think of counterterrorism, they think of, law enforcement. A lot of it is law enforcement type investigations to that degree in preventing attacks. But when these incidents do occur, the first responders, as far as those who are going to provide rescues and medical aid, is the New York City Fire Department. And after 9/11, not only do you have that, but you also have the flip side when people, and it's unfortunate it took that tragedy for people to realize this, but we should probably clue in the biggest fire department, or one of the biggest fire departments in the world, on the prevention side of it too. So tell me about getting that particular command and what your day-to-day entails.
Well, I'll just go back a second. So the Center for Terrorism and Disaster Preparedness has been around for about 20 years now, and from where they were on where we were on 9/11, where we didn't even have one, to now, I mean, we now have a seat in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We have an intel branch in our counterterrorism, where we get information on whether it's something that happens half a world away, or up in the Bronx, that's something, hey, this might affect us. We now have a seat at that table where we can look at that information and say, hey, how is this going to affect the fire department? Their nationally distributed newsletter, The Watchline, breaks down different events, whether they be natural disasters or terroristic activity or bad fires, and how it affects the fire departments or the fire service. They have an incredible exercise design team where they'll build you an exercise to test your facility. They work with the Maritime University. They work with the Coast Guard. They work with JFK. They work with the NYPD, West Point cadets, where they'll put out tabletop exercises or live exercises to test the preparedness of an agency. And then there's us. There's the Counterterrorism Task Force, which kind of came into play after the Bataclan attacks in Paris a few years ago, 2015, where it was after '99, after the Columbine shooting, where the mentality of the PD changed. Watching people bleed out on TV. That the police realized we have to go in there, we have to stop the killing, have to stop the dying, and then putting fire and EMS resources into that still dangerous environment to treat these people and get them out as fast as they can to start saving lives. So that's where the fire department's counterterrorism task force was born. Was after that, and they've done an incredible job of finding the talent to build that program. And it's come a long way since then, and we kind of set the national standard. I'd like to think when it comes to those sort of operations.
Many would concur, and in 2023, technology is so much different than when the unit first started in 2003. You have so much at your disposal. You have a lot of talented people that know how to use it. So tell me about now, as far as we talked about the styles of leadership, what is your style been to this point? What's your day-to-day like at a unit like that?
Well, the day to day is it's more of just the day. I'm still online in the field, working as a deputy chief in open divisions citywide, and I'm at counterterrorism about one day a week, trying to maintain that role and keep it going, and then working on it, in the firehouse and everything else. It's been a challenge. It's definitely been a challenge in light of everything that's going on. We're talking about cutting back budgets, cutting back overtime, coming out of the pandemic, where there was 3 years without training, 2 to 3 years without training or refreshing these members in rescue task force operations. There's been a huge challenge because of the sort of surprise, the change in tactics, like going in and telling firemen, hey, you're going to put on this ballistic gear and you're going to go into a shootings area and you're going to pull people out, and guys going, no, we don't want any part of that. We just did a class last night of members who have had no initial training, and we had 30 guys turn out. And they were into it. They were active, and I've met with some of these company commanders, and there are a good number of them that are, hey, we don't want to do it, but it's our job, and we're going to do the best at it. And these companies have really made sure their guys are refreshed and they're up to date on the procedures. And we now are able to, instead of taking a company and sending them there, we now will hire a dedicated rescue task force to be in the vicinity of a planned event, ready to go if something goes wrong. And we have people volunteering, hey, I'll do that, no problem. And so some of the events we have coming up, we have the Halloween parade tonight that we have a rescue task force out for. We've got the New York City Marathon on Sunday. We're providing 4 rescue task forces for, because those are the biggest challenges, are the events that are spread over several, like the 5-borough bike tour. We're talking about a large area protecting millions of people over 26, 40 miles, depending on the event. Those are the real challenges in making sure that everyone has adequate protection.
And I was going to say, you guys don't get a break because September through December is the busiest period. You mentioned, of course, tonight and in the coming days ahead. You got New Year's Eve coming up soon. You just got past Unga, too. So
Yes.
September to December is a gauntlet, but you guys make it look so easy. And you're not even mentioning, had the Yankees and Mets decided to not be doggy-doo this year, you probably would have had playoff duty at Citi Field and Yankee Stadium, too.
Yeah, we would provided coverage for that. I will say, one of the interesting things to come out of this is that the cooperation between the PD, the NYPD, and fire department and EMS in this type of operation is incredible. And we have such a great working relationship with the NYPD SRG right now, and even ESU, which when I came on the job, it was this, and to have ESU, come and say, hey, can you provide us a little intel on us? Can you provide a little support for this arrest we're about to do, and call us up and look for us and put us there. We truly appreciate that, and to see that sort of cooperation is something, our senior chiefs are like, wait, ESU called you? Like, yeah, they wanted us they wanted our help on something. Oh, that's great. So it's different times
because I paid a visit to Truck One ESU last summer, and one of the guys was telling me on a radio frequency there will be instances where, like you said, ESU will call up the FDNY at a certain job and say, hey, can you get us this? And vice versa. The FDNY will call ESU up and say, hey, we need this. Can you swing some guys down and help us with X, Y, and Z? And like you said, when you came on the job in 1997, that was unheard of. But to see that blend happen now, like you said, it's great.
Right. Yeah. And it's just, I guess part of growing up and just going, hey, we're all here. We all have a job to do. There's no sense getting each other's way. And it's so much easier to work that way too, instead of having to like, hurry up, ESU's coming, we got to get this done, So it's very refreshing, and it's fun. And again, the Flying Aces event where Dave Riley from ESU, great guy, and got to meet and talk to him. I met him prior to that, and at their base, and I never thought I'd be sitting in an ESU office across from 3 ESU offices, saying, "Yeah, what do you want from us? We'll you tell us what you need, we'll help you out." And the guy's like, "Really? I can't pick up the phone."
Yeah. So, there's a great spirit of cooperation. That's why I was surprised. And even though Andy Burchett doesn't roll this way, he's always been a guy that, he's good to everyone. And that's one of the many things to love about him. When you said, oh, I'm with the FDNY, I'm like, we truly have come a long way.
Yeah.
We met that night at Citi Field. I believe they were playing the Brewers. So, even though the Mets lost that night, it was a great night. And it paved the way for this interview that's happening, of course, tonight. So I'll ask you before I get to the rapid fire and the hours flown by. You seem to be in a real sweet spot in your career right now. You do have the counterterrorism 1 day a week, but like you said, you get to be citywide and go to different places for the most part. So, what do you hope to continue to accomplish, especially as you're pushing towards a milestone in a few years, and that's going to be 30 years on the job?
I just hope that, when I leave, when I retire, that, guys will look back and go, hey, I left it better than I found it. My mentality is, if I'm given something to do, the last thing I want is my name on, a Charlie Foxtrot, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go, that was Miller's problem. And look what he left us. Everything I try and do is just to try and whatever you hand me, I'm going to try and do my best to make it better. And maybe all the guys don't like me, but I hope they respect me. I hope, they understand why I made the decisions I made. But I mean, I feel like I have a great relationship with guys of all ranks, and I never have a problem where, hey, we can work this out. And that's what I hope for. I mean, I hope down the road with counterterrorism that we get this back to where it was, and that it's we have a great product that I hope we never ever have to deploy. I hope we never ever have to go into a warm zone. But I certainly hope that that if we do, we're ready to go and that we can make a difference.
I think you will be. I definitely think you will be. Of course, we hope that doesn't happen. But if it were to happen, I think the FDNY is a lot more prepared now than they were 20, 25 years ago for these sorts of events of any kind, involving mass casualties. So now it's time for the rapid fire. Not off the hook yet. Now you're on the hot seat. That's 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. First question: funniest call you ever responded to?
Funniest call. You said this was a clean show, so we responded to a food on the stove in Jackson Heights, and the woman the woman in the apartment had quite a few and was very vocal, and she had not put everything away that she should have, and I'll leave it at that. But we kind of pointed it out, like, ma'am, and she just looked at us and laughed, and we were like, I can't believe that just happened. It was an oddball, yeah.
Only in New York.
I can tell you off the air if you want.
Please do. I want to hear the full version, and we will off there. Second most uplifting call you ever responded to?
That was October of 22. I was acting deputy chief in the 6th Division, and the guy who sat 2 seats away from me in Proby School, John Vanderstar, was a truck boss in 44 truck, and I was there when he literally crawled through a wall of fire to get to a back bedroom because he heard a kid cry, and the line was delayed. And Mickey Conboy from Rescue 3 was up there, and they made some tough calls. And again, fortunately, I knew the players, and they basically closed him in that apartment. And he wouldn't even made the move if he hadn't heard the kid cry at the last second. So he gets back there. Now he's given a report. You can hear the kid crying over the air, over the handy-talkie, and they close him in there, and he's calling for water. They finally get the water. Then him coming down with the kid. And then and the mom, they eventually got the mom down, and they both walked out of the hospital. And just a huge credit to the kind of guy John Vanderstar is. But that was one of those, he's on the knee, he's taking a knee, he's spent, and I just go up and I put my hand on him and go, John, man, thank God. And yeah, that was a good day. That was a really good day.
And there's a lot of them on the job. For as many tough calls as there are, you get a job like that one that reminds you why you do what you do. That's an excellent story. Thank you for sharing that. Third, best advice anyone ever gave you?
Senior man from 48 truck used to always say, this giant of a man named John Brownagel. And he would work from sun up to sundown, but he would always, you'd be a probie and you'd be trying to do something, and he'd always catch it the wrong moment, and you'd be sitting there, and he'd always just tell it, can't do anything with your hands in your pockets, sonny boy. And just basically keep busy, keep working, and that's some of the best advice. I use that one all the time. You see the probies, they get nervous, and they finally get a second to relax, and you go, hey, can't do anything with your hands in your pockets, sonny boy.
You can pass it along. Let's pass it down. It's right. Keep busy.
Yeah, none of my stuff is original. It's all it's all from somewhere along the line.
Oh, listen, the biggest form of flattery is imitation. So there you go. It's a tribute to him. To him.
Absolutely.
Fourth, favorite bar or restaurant. You could say multiple here. It doesn't have to be one. Favorite bar or restaurant in New York City.
In New York City, probably the White Horse Tavern in Lower Manhattan.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a throwback place, and it's, you walk in there and you're like, wow, but it's just the vibe there, and the drink specials. It's a fun place. Yeah.
It sounds like I got to go down there next time I'm in the city. Fifth and finally, now you have this because you're still on the job, so you run into your fair share of probies. Besides telling them to keep their hands out of their pockets because you can't do anything with your hands in your pockets, sonny boy, borrowing that from your senior man, what advice besides that do you give anybody coming on the job now?
Anybody coming on the job now is just enjoy it. I'm fortunate enough that we give the probies a little rescue task force awareness class, so I do get to interact with them, and and I just tell them at the end, I go sit back and enjoy it, laugh, have fun. The 22 years is going to go, very fast. I can't believe I'm at 30 already. But it goes fast, and just enjoy it. Enjoy every minute of it, and it's not worth being miserable over, and learn as much as you can.
It does fly by. It does fly by. That's what a lot of guys tell me. Chief, this has been great. Stick around. We'll talk off the air, especially because I got to hear that story. But before I say goodbye to the audience, any shout outs to anyone or anything that you'd like to give?
No, just the guys who I've worked with over the years. 48 truck, 94 engine, 3rd Battalion. The guys in 307 and 154. The guys in 286. 285, 142, 60, 17, and a 14th Battalion. It's just you're only as good as the firemen you work with, and I've been very blessed to work with some great firemen over the years. A lot of fun, a lot of great memories along the way. It's kind of tough to think it's going to be coming to an end soon, but I've enjoyed. I can honestly say there are very few moments in my career that I've ever second guessed what I did. And I'm just very blessed to have arrived at this point and worked with the guys I've worked with, and girls. I've had a few women in cross career paths with too, and they've been great too.
Absolutely. Shout out to them as well. There's a couple girls that are in the academy that'll be coming out of my department soon in Connecticut. And we have one that works there now. So yeah, girls can do the job too. No confusion about that. Like I said, stick around. We'll start goodbyes off the air. Shout out to everybody that tuned in tonight via LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Coming up next on the Mike to New Haven podcast, a couple of really interesting shows. One, he was in the Joint Terrorism Task Force on the NYPD side. He retired back at the tail end of 2020. And one of his most notable instances of what he was able to do in the Joint Terrorism Task Force was rescue a kidnapped journalist in the Middle East. He's Detective Tom Smith, and he'll be able to tell me that story and much more this Friday at 7 p.m. And we're starting a new mini-series. We have the Beat Profiles of Police Nationwide. Now it's time for the Best of the Bravest Nationwide edition that's coming up soon. So we'll be having a guest. I don't want to spoil it, but that guest is coming up in short order for later on this month. So a little teaser for that. But the show after Tom Smith is an ESU one, speaking of ESU, and that's John Scrivani, who I've been looking to get on for a long time. He'll be on November 7th. Tuesday, of course, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. In the meantime, on behalf of Deputy Chief Paul Miller, I'm Mike Colón. This has been Volume 46 of the Best of the Bravest, interviews with the FDNY's elite, and we will see you next time. Have a great night, everybody. See you Friday.
Thanks, Mike.